Hello, my friend. Hey, I'm
Hello.
really, I'm really interested in what you do.
Okay, so what I do is I'm the founder and the CEO of Sea Waves. So that's an acronym that's short for a long name. Ready? It's Support Education Awareness, Wellness, and Validations for Eating Disorders and Self-Care. So what is that? That's pretty much a big title to say that I connect the military community and family members and veterans with the eating disorder resources that they need and they require that are traditionally pretty difficult to access on our own through the military community. So I try to make that a little bit more available to everybody.
How come you went into the military scene?
Say again.
How come you went into the military scene more specifically?
Well, because I did 20 years in the Navy, and while I was serving in the Navy, I struggled with my own eating disorders. That different diagnoses, different times.
Yeah.
And when it came time for me to get treatment and support, it was very difficult, nearly non-existent. And so I really felt a calling to kind of try to fix the system that's broken.
Hmm. Eating disorders is one of those things, right? That it grapples everyone, and yet it kind of goes unsaid, unspoken about, unless it's the traditional anorexia where you can see it, right?
Right.
Um, Most folks kind of get pushed to the wayside, and it's like, well, it's not talked about. It's this kind of like hush hush kind of thing that people end up suffering in silence to use a keto, and it's strange. It really is strange because it hits us all.
Right. And I think, that's just society in general, right? It's pretty taboo and difficult to talk about, even though it's 2024. Um, and so in the military, that becomes even more taboo with stigma,
Mm.
because nobody wants to associate with having any kind of issues. And then, I do notice that like a lot of people are concerned that they don't have the diagnosis of an eating disorder, which also in the military is very difficult to get because there's not very many providers that are qualified to give that diagnosis. And so I just really want to put it out there that there's a very small fine line between eating disorders and disordered eating. And I think most of us can relate to disordered eating
Yeah.
on a scale. And then it's just when it really starts to affect your life and your quality of life and your relationships and your work, I think that's when you cross more into eating disordered diagnoses. But I do want to circle back to a point that you made that was just interesting to me is a lot of people do think that they recognize anorexia, right?
Mm.
And they think that they know what anorexia looks like. And when you look at symptoms of what, in the 80s and the 90s on the Lifetime channel and the talk show hosts and what anorexia we all were trained what that looks like, it's just really not factual anymore. So I wanted to point out a statistic that a lot of people look for being underweight as a criteria for anorexia. And the fact of the matter is only 94% of people diagnosed with anorexia um, are not in the underweight category. So only 6% would be considered underweight with anorexia. The other 94% have not reached the underweight medical category.
Holy fuck. So what category would they fall into? Not like.
Bodies of any size, bodies of any size. So that's the big thing is eating disorders, they just really don't discriminate. Body size, male, female, gender, career, race, they affect everybody. And it's
Mm.
not just the three that we always heard of before, anorexia, bulimia, and overeating. Those were the three again that we were brought up on. But there's actually six in the DSM-5 now that you can be diagnosed with, and actually a seventh where it's kind of a catch-all where if you don't quite qualify. Because in the past, nobody could be diagnosed with anorexia until they reached the underweight category. But that left that 94% of people that were struggling with all the symptoms of anorexia
Mm.
and, all of the stress and pressure, but without the diagnosis and therefore without treatment. So it's a lot of like myth busting and kind of breaking what we thought we used to know and just relearning how this applies today.
Yeah, it's similar to like blood pressure, right? We all hear 120/80, right? And they're like, you're not in the like obscene category, so you're fine. It's like, we gotta wait until people are literally at the bottom of the barrel to help them get back out. Like, I thought prevention was the best medicine here. If we can see somebody slipping down this slope and we know where they're going to end up and they know where they're going to end up and they're struggling. We're all struggling. That's okay. We've all have struggled and we can lend out a hand every now and again. It's like, all right, cool. If we know where we're going, we don't have to wait for them to arrive there to be like, oh, now you qualify for X treatment or X funding. I understand that, you know, money's tight and allocation of funding and pennies and stuff, but there has to be resources where medical professionals can be like, listen, I'm sorry that you're not quite there yet to justify getting this tablet or this treatment or this fund. Cool. However, there is a free one over here. There's got to be. We've got to be able to stop people from hitting that bottom of the barrel.
Right. And I think that you said something really important there is that prevention is really the best medicine. And then, as far as prevention goes, it's really about awareness and discussion. And so
Yeah.
I think that's another reason why in the military it's just a really difficult topic to assess and to prevent. Because of the atmosphere that is the military, we have to make a certain weight requirement publicly in front of our peers, our subordinates, our leaders. We get on a scale in front of our peers, and if we don't make the weight that's predetermined for us, then you get measuring taped, and then they have to measure tape your neck and your waist and your hips, and it's just a very I don't know, it's a very triggering process, right? And so the pressure of that, and even though while I was active duty, I wasn't really at risk of failing my weigh-ins, the drive for perfection and dedication and to show my value in the role that I was in, I felt like I had to be the best version of me. And in my eating disorder mind, that meant the thinnest version of me. Um, and so I think it is just really differentiating like what's required of us in the military, what we put on ourselves in the military, and what's healthy, right? And so of course we have to have those numbers so we can have a fit force. We have to have requirements so that
Mm.
we have a healthy team to protect our nation. But what I'd really like to say as far as prevention is it's so important in how we get there. It's how we get there. Right now, there are some very, very unhealthy practices in the military that people do before weigh-ins. Extreme dehydration and laxative use and um, different methods. I try not to name them specifically because I don't want to give anybody ideas that haven't already thought of them. But we go through pretty drastic measures to shrink our body for that test. And I just think it's time for leaders and the rest of us to say, but how and why?
Mm. Do you have fitness tests as well, or is it literally stand on the scale and if you don't hit a certain number, then you've kind of failed?
That's the initial part. So the first part is stand on the scale. If you don't hit that number, then you have the opportunity to be taped with a measuring tape. Again, it leaves a lot of room for human error, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of discussion on how accurate that is. And then after that part is complete, then you have a physical assessment. It's slightly different amongst each branches, and it changes, a little bit, but primarily for, the 20 years that I was in the Navy, it's, run a mile and a half as fast as you can.
Mhm.
And then it's as many push-ups and sit-ups or push-ups and planks as you can in 2 minutes. Um, which, is some could argue is a fair assessment, some argue that it's not. But I will say this, after you've done what you can for weeks on end to shrink your body to make the number that's required of you, you definitely aren't in a healthy position to then exert yourself to run as fast as you can for a mile and a half.
Mm.
It's very obviously dangerous, and a lot of things do come up where it's hurtful for people. But again, I don't think that a lot of the leaders or professionals realize how connected it is to the malnutrition and the fueling that happens leading up to these events.
Yeah, I find it strange, like with a clearly an output based job, right? Being in the military is very similar to being in sports. It's based on the output. You have to be able to do things, right? You have to be good at your job at the end of the day. Like there is something to be done. You need to fucking do it. Right. And then assessing whether you're going to be capable of doing said job of not doing it and not giving you a test and standing on a scale first, to my mind, doesn't make any sense. I was like, well, if you can hit this criteria and you're heavier or lighter than the next person, it doesn't matter because you've hit this criteria. You know, I've had discussions in the past where they opened up the SAS in the UK for females now, right? And it's like, great, you have the same level of fitness requirement. And if you hit it, it doesn't matter if you're a bloke or a lady. It doesn't matter if you're tall or short. It doesn't matter if you're 100 kilos or 50. You know, there is here it is. Can you hit it? Yes, you can do the job. Congratulations. You know, like you are the one who should be representing the country. You are the one who should be out on the front line at home doing whatever job it is. It's quite strange that it's now, or maybe it's always been that way. I'm showing a little bit of ignorance, but it's, hey, let's assess your numerical relationship with gravity and let me dictate whether you can do a outcome based role from numbers. Doesn't make sense to me.
Correct. Especially considering that not every position in the military is strictly physical, right?
Yeah.
Um and as you and go further in your career, especially for me as I rose in the ranks, my body, especially after having children, just didn't respond the way it did, right before 9/11 when I joined the Navy. And so I think that a lot of people are seeing that too, is if they didn't struggle in the beginning, certainly we're struggling towards the end. And these are leaders that have just many years of experience and knowledge and training. And now if their waist is an inch bigger than the allotted time, like that doesn't pull their leadership abilities and all of the training that they've received for decades and decades.
Mm.
But it can absolutely affect 1 inch, half an inch, excuse me. It can affect their career progression and even their ability to serve.
Yeah, it's like if I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself here, I can understand that it's trying to encourage, keeping moving and all that. But I think we're going about it in a strange way, right? Of like, okay, cool. Like maybe you got a desk job. Sound, no problem. Like you don't need to be able to run a mile and a half in less than X amount of time, but you need to hit 3 fitness sessions per week. We're going to put these things on because healthy body, healthy mind, right? Like again, it's an output thing. You might be behind the desk, but if you're tired, you're miserable, you're depressed, you're focusing on something else, you're stressing on something else, do you really think that you're going to have a great impact to your job? No, like it's all about output, like production, productivity. Like, are we the best that we can be at our job? I would argue that the healthiest version of the individual, which looks completely different for every individual, will then create the best productivity for that individual, for that role. But again, nuance means you've got to put effort in. And when you use that E word, you got to put a little bit of effort. People are like, oh, can I not just blanket statement one size fits all? It's a little bit easier. It's like
Mm.
if we show a little bit of effort, I think folks take responsibility and place it on their own shoulders, and then they will do it. They will show up. It's just you got to show a little bit of effort in the short term, front load it, And then I would argue that in the long run, folks gain a little bit more autonomy.
I would absolutely agree. Um, I think that you're spot on. And I guess if I could just summarize, really of what my whole message is down to one is you really pretty much just nailed it, is health. It's just health.
Mm.
Like I know that the numbers have to be there. Let's make sure we do this in a healthy way. I know that we need to be physically, capable of certain things in different jobs. Great. Let's get there in a healthy way. It's not a yes or no at all costs matters. Let's work together. And like you said, maybe it is a little bit more of an individual approach than what we're used to. And it will take some more like thinking outside of the box to kind of break that culture of what's always been. And just because we've always had it that way doesn't mean it's always right. And I think that especially the military has made a lot of strides, specifically I would say in the last decade or so, of trying to understand the mental health as the big piece, along with physical health. But we're still struggling. We're struggling very much. Our suicide numbers
Mm.
are way higher than they should be. And so the mental health piece is still just a piece that people are striving to understand, and they want to fix and help. But I will point out that eating disorders, the number one cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. And so while the military is working really hard at, lowering our suicide numbers, I'd like to say that it's crucial that they acknowledge the impact of eating disorders, and specifically having resources to help with those. If you look at what they say, 1/3 of females and 1/5 of males in the military are struggling with an eating disorder. um the numbers will connect to the suicide impacts too. And so if we're not prioritizing resources and health for people with eating disorders, it is definitely affecting the overall readiness and the overall health of our force, not just physically but mentally.
Mm. And it goes to that education piece too, right? We got to be able to teach a man how to fish rather than just give him a fish.
Exactly.
And a lot of the time, again, I draw a comparison for pro sport and military base. Like you have these wonderful human beings that can fucking do an amazing amount of work, right? You look at it, you're like, well, that is not possible. And yet they're doing it.
Mhm.
But they're great followers. And then what happens when you climb the rank? Or what happens when you leave pro sport? You now have autonomy over yourself. You have, this is you. What are you going to do? It's like, well, I've just followed for my life. And now it becomes an issue, right? And if you add in a little bit of loneliness on top of that too, right? Like a lot of it is communication via technology, which is an incredible thing, but it takes out the human factor. It takes out brushing shoulders and being able to high five, and like we don't touch each other anymore. That sounds really weird when you take it out of context, but we don't.
Yeah.
You don't shake
Hmm.
hands. COVID made us all freak out,
Hmm.
understandably so. But I think it's gone a bit too far, in my personal opinion. I was like, guys, we're social creatures, and then that over time, that little bit of abrasion of characters, you're like, oh, you know what? I've developed a relationship with at least one person out there that I can then talk to them about something. A problem shared is a problem halved, right? And then, oh, okay, well, you're struggling with that. You're struggling with the same thing, something a little bit different, but we're both in the pit together. Oh, okay, wow. I thought I was on my own. I like to think about anything going upstairs, whether it's eating disorder, whether it's anxiety, whether whatever it is like you're in a room, right? And it's pitch black and you feel like you're on your own. And when you're on your own in a pitch black, you usually start hearing things, right? And you start seeing shadows, even though it's pitch black. Your mind will play tricks on you. But you don't realize there is a light switch in there. When you flick it on, that room's actually full of people. There's a lot of people in there with you, and there's a lot of people with you, and there's a lot of people who give a shit, right? But it starts off with that education, and it starts off with just being able to chat to people. And I understand military, you got to be stern, you got to get the job done. Yeah, 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 sound. But you got to debrief, right? Like you've got to then, okay, you've done your mission. What are you gonna do now? Well, you just go home? Like, no, you got to debrief. All right, sound. And then you need a serviceman or woman to be absolutely mentally tip top, physically tip top, because then you're unstoppable. It's the same with sport, and it's the same with civilians. But again, it's hard, takes a lot of effort. It's uncomfortable conversations. So folks feel like they're cast to the side and they get even more lonely, and it's sad, man. It really is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that camaraderie is one of the best parts of being in the military. My experience, especially, looking back, it's the people. It's always been the people, right? It's always been about
Yeah.
the people. And yes, I think that's one of the things that I'm working towards. It's the logo in Sea Waves in our name was very well thought out, and it's a lighthouse.
Mhm.
And it makes me think exactly of what you just said. Is just, yeah, you think you're in the room, the dark room alone, but if somebody sheds the light, you can see who else is kind of around you. And so that's kind of what I think of when I try to bring more like awareness and attention and discussion to eating disorders, is just let's shine a light, not only for the people that are stuck in the dark right now, but for for everybody to see who's alongside of them.
Yeah. There's a lot of people. And there is goodness in people. Like people do give a shit about other folks. I know we like to concentrate our attention on the negative, and the media does a really great job of that, right? Like, because it gets you to click on it and it makes you a little bit pissed and frustrated and anxious and on the edge of your seat. And yeah, it's doing its job. Like, if you consume it, they make money. So guess what? Stop bloody consuming it if it's going to piss you off. Yeah, okay,
Right.
you need to be informed, but do you need to be informed about that much? I don't know, man. 300 years ago, we're not going to know what's going to happen across the sea. Do you need to know everything? Potentially, potentially not. I don't know. I'm the wrong guy to ask. But what I mean by it is that a lot of folks care, and a lot of folks understand at least the emotion, right? And can apply a little bit of empathy and be like, I have no idea what you're going through, but I can feel the emotion from
Hmm.
just looking in your eyes. You're
Hmm.
like, okay, shit, like we gotta figure this out. We gotta figure out how to do this. We gotta navigate it so we can make a strong team, so we can build some beautiful things, so we can make a lot of progress, so we can win championships, whatever it is. Being good at your job is a pretty fun thing to do. But if you're not good upstairs, you can't be good at your job.
Indeed.
What's the greatest piece of life advice you've ever received?
Don't do it alone. Don't do
Hmm.
it alone. That really hit me. It's a smaller version of what a mentor used to say to me. If you want to go, how do you say it? If you want to go far, go by yourself, but oh, I can't think of the exact thing, so I keep it short. But don't go it alone, and it applies to so many things. Like you were saying earlier, like we're not meant to be robots. We're meant to be compassionate human beings, and we aren't meant to go through struggle alone. And that absolutely rings true for eating disorders. There's a lot of isolation and darkness that comes with eating disorders. There's a lot of secretiveness and lies, and it just kind of comes along with the disease itself. And so I think like the first thing that anybody can do when trying to get better is to get a buddy, to get a person, just talk to somebody that you trust and that you care about. There's always going to be somebody. It might not be an easy conversation. It probably won't be, but that's definitely the first step on in anything. And is take somebody alongside of you. And when you've gotten far enough in your journey that you're walking pretty confidently, then look back and see who else you can take with you. But don't go it alone.
Yeah, be the lighthouse for somebody else, right? And I think
Mhm.
uh I think lion ends up infecting our soul, man. I think it really does. It's like Voldemort, right? With the Horcruxes, it just it fragments part of us, and then if you go further and further down that, we know where we're going to end up. And Matthew McConaughey says it's about leaving breadcrumbs. Don't leave crumbs. Don't lie, don't bullshit. Figure it out. The truth is always the best thing, even if it is a bit of a slap in the face. We can all deal with that.
Well, that certainly holds true for me. When I left the military, I always used to tell myself, oh, when I don't have to do these weigh-ins anymore, then I'll do better in eating disorder recovery, and I'll start my recovery later, when I get out of the military, And my therapist said, like, this is growing in your secrets and lies, and the more people that you're hiding this from. So that's really what initiated all of this, out of a moment of, I don't, maybe it was weakness, maybe it was clarity, maybe it was spite. I'm not really sure, but I came out completely to everybody on my social media, my entire network, all of my family. Everybody found out the same way, the same day. Um, and that is really what opened this up to other people feeling comfortable and reaching out to me and saying, like, I struggle with that, or my sister, or my uncle, or my shitmate, and now what? And and then I think that's what we said, the light went on the room, and I was like, well, there's a lot of people in here with us. And, a lot of people came at me with the now what and now what, and the answers were very difficult. And so once I found myself in that light and living my light and my truth, now I'm able to look for solutions. And so the now what for me was to found Sea Waves. It was to partner with the crisis text line and get that resource out immediately to the people that were hurting right then in that moment. And then now it's to continue to grow with the awareness and education and systematic changes. But absolutely none of this would have happened, and these discussions wouldn't have been able to come to light if I didn't have the moment of, I don't know, like I said, bravery or insanity of just breaking the lies and the secrecy and just claiming what it was.
Within the depths of vulnerability, you find strength.
Yes.
That's always been in there. The lies just cover it up. It's in you. It's in everybody. You know, everything you ever need is already within you. People and experiences just help pull it out. It's
Yes.
there. It's okay. You can have a little rub on the shoulder and help bring it out like a genie in the bottle. That's all right. But we all got that little light. We've got to let the little crack of the character, life's got to break us a little bit to let that shine out. That's okay. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the worst piece of life advice you've ever received?
Hmm. I haven't given that a lot of thoughts. I don't know. That's probably a trick question for me, because I think I might be an optimist where I try to find, the good in each thing, right? And so even though I've gotten some different advice, like for example, I've had some, not very good leaders in the military, and it was very clear, that they were struggling with their leadership abilities. Um, but what I tried to do is just learn from each one of them too. Like, I guess just try to take the good out of the bad. And so, yeah, even though there's been a lot of bad advice and things given, I think what keeps me going is trying to pull the silver lining out of each of it.
Sometimes that's harder than others, right?
Yeah,
That's what makes life fun. What are the 3 words you would tell your younger self?
it gets better.
Thank you. Mate, this has been an honor and a privilege, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're doing some incredible shit.
Thanks.
You're helping a lot of people. And it starts off with that little conversation because it's a hand around the shoulder. It's a hug on the coldest of days. It's an umbrella when it rains. That's what it is. Opens up the conversation and people can access it at their own time, whether that's the written word whether that's a little diagram, whether that's a resource, whether that's what we're doing now. And people can get to it when they need to. You've lit the way. They just have to walk towards that light. Because we can't arrive at their door and break it down and be like, here you go. Here's all the fucking things that you're gonna need. It's
Take
like
it.
they're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
They gotta come to you. But you can light it up. You can be the lighthouse, and that's what you're doing. So, mate, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day, and we'll speak soon.
Okay, you too.
You legend.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.